Let's welcome our guest for this hour, trial attorney Michael Jaafar. And I said, Michael, because Jaafar, I'm going to call you Jaafar and you Ayala again. But let me say this. When the verdict came down against Charlie, I remember saying, hey, I think she's on a flight. She is out of here. She's got the financial resources. She's leaving. But Michael Jaafar, why would you wait a week to do it if you're really going to do it in order to escape prosecution?
The circumstances boggle me, Judge Ashley. This is Shakespeare, right? I was too curious. Last night I went on Google and I typed in the Adelson Dental Institute. I just wanted to see what their lives were like before this happened. And I saw a bunch of reviews on Yelp and on Google and, hey, they took care of my root canal. Hey, these people they made it. They were rich. They were living in Florida. They were rich in Florida. They weren't rich outside of Florida, then they moved to Florida. They were rich in Florida. They were what you would call stereotypical rich dentists. The fact that they undertook this scheme and then she called the jail while her son was there and told them, don't worry, I'm going to go to a non-extradition treaty country. I'm going to do this. This is 8 years in the making. It boggles my mind. I don't think I have ever seen a precedent like this. So I can only think of Shakespeare. That's all I can think of. You're right, Judge Ashley. You did say that. And when you said it, I thought to myself, there's no way this lady would be dumb enough to book a one-way ticket to I don't think there's no way they'd be this successful and be that dumb. You did say that. It was exactly what she did.
And it is surprising to me, too. It's like, are you kidding? A week later? Doesn't make sense.
I mean, what really doesn't make sense to me is that you're on prison phone calls basically saying that this is what you're going to do. I mean, that's the part. I mean, we see this time and time again, Michael. It's like these folks, I don't know what they're thinking, but at the end of the day, I want to listen here to the possibility that this flight or this attempted flight and even these phone calls can be used as evidence against Donna. It took years for them to bring the case against Charlie. They wanted to dot their I's and cross their T's. I think clearly so much of the evidence that we saw in Charlie's trial can easily be transferred over to her trial. Case looks strong.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you. And also, I'll also add, I don't think, even if Charlie was acquitted, I don't think that let me rephrase. I don't think that if she tried to fly sooner, she would have had a different result. I think if she tried to fly before his guilty verdict was rendered, I think they still would have arrested her and brought her in. They clearly have been looking at this woman and this entire family the whole entire time. And they clearly tried Charlie first in order to kind of flesh out facts. So if she tried to fly 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, they still would have arrested her. They would have brought her in. I mean, there's no way that they already have a grand jury being impaneled to look at her case. So I don't think that she flew a week too late, but I do agree that him getting convicted kind of just changed the game, and no one's leaving. They're all getting charged.
So, you know, he's a former federal prosecutor in Florida. His name is Tim Jansen, as he was sharing information and the immunity issue and not getting any immunity. But even without that, I think she wasn't going to get anywhere close to the courtroom where Charlie was being tried. I think she thought she'd get away with it all. And viewers have really said some evil things about this matriarch because they believe she was behind it all in the first place. What do you think, Michael?
I agree. I mean, the fact that she called the jail and she knew at that point that the calls were being recorded, and she told her son, you know, she's going to go to a non-extradition treaty country. I mean, the hubris, really, it's just, that's why I called this Shakespeare, because with Shakespearean plays, you have hubris, you have family tragedies, you have bizarre crimes for people that didn't need to do it. I mean, this family didn't need to kill a former son-in-law, the father of their grandchildren. They didn't need to conspire to do all that. They could have just fought with the guy and then just called them names. The testimony in the trial showed that the mom would call him idiot when her grandchildren were on the phone with him. Oh, here's the idiot. Here, they successfully painted her out to be a villain, Judge Ashley. And so because they painted her as a villain, the jury pool knows this woman is a villain. She tried to flee the country. I think her goose is cooked.
I think it is too, but here's the irony to me, Ayala, is that, hey, I want my grandkids, we're gonna murder them, we get our grandkids, but yet I'm gonna flee to Vietnam where I'm never gonna see my grandkids again.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes no sense.
Still with us, trial attorney Michael Jaafar. And Michael, I was making the comment that if a jury was listening to this, it might be a little bit dry and going too fast, but the judge is listening to it. He's very familiar with this kind of information. Tell us, do you think it's making a difference, hitting home with, for instance, the immaturity and the actions by this 16-year-old boy?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, I'd be a hypocrite if I told you I'm the same man today that I was 30 years ago. 30 years ago, you know, when I was these boys' age, I mean, it's crazy, you know, how much of a different person you are. A human being keeps forming until they reach the age of 25. When they're the age of 16, their prefrontal cortex is just developing. I'm not excusing what they did. They need to be held accountable. A poor woman lost her life, and they were to blame. But they're not adults. I mean, there is some, you know, a percentage of the judge's decision has to weigh in the fact that they were 16. And yes, they were immature because it, you know, relates to their culpability, and their culpability obviously is smaller than a 45-year-old person who premeditated this, planned it, and did it. So I do think it was making a difference, yes.
And Michael, I think it's particularly important for this particular defendant, only because he wasn't the main person. He was the one that kind of went along with it. And I think it's important for the judge to be reminded of this idea that when you are 16, you are so susceptible to peer pressure. Yeah. And you get involved in these situations, and you can be egged into doing something. We see it all the time. Thankfully, in most cases, it's not something as bad as this. And you would think that this sort of moral compass would click in at some point, but he's also explaining this moral culpability aspect. I think it's all pretty important.
I fully agree with you. When I was watching that testimony, I was thinking of all the things that I've experienced, you know, growing up, and my friends did, and they just got lucky, and I'm lucky to even be alive. I mean, we engaged in so many risky things and jumping off things, and we're just lucky to be alive. When that doctor was talking, I was thinking about, you know, he was saying even if you emigrate to a country and you're younger than 12, you don't even have to learn the language. You'll just absorb it, and you won't have an accent. And I thought about myself. I immigrated here when I was 9. I don't have an accent. I never studied the language. And that just shows you how impressionable your mind is at that age. And so this kid, I could see this kid getting invited with his other friend. He wanted to fit in. And, hey, come here. We're going to talk to her about this bad grade in the Spanish class. One thing led to another, and then she died, and they admitted to it. I'm not excusing it, but I agree with you, Michael. Yeah, I mean, he wasn't the perpetrator. He was there. So I think it matters, and I think it should lessen his sentence. I don't think this kid should go away for 5,000 years like the other kid. You know, I mean, these sentences are just handed out, and they're so large and they're so long, and people, we just got so used to it. But I agree with you, Michael. I think that matters.
Yeah, it does matter, and I think that's part, Judge, why the prosecution is seeking a little bit less time for him than they sought for the other guy, being that he was the instigator. It was his situation, and he pulled this guy in.
I agree with you completely. I just have to comment, some countries have much lower life sentences if they're convicted of a crime like murder. For instance, 10 years, I think.